And President Trump and the Chinese President Xi Jinping have agreed to meet next month at the G20 summit in hopes of resolving their intensifying trade conflict. Now, several reports suggest the planned sit-down, which Beijing sought to forestall further U.S. tariffs, would represent the first direct talk since August, as well as a temporary victory for the moderates. But it's hard to anticipate as of now whether there will be a major breakthrough or not. Now, the agreement to restart negotiations comes 3 weeks after Trump slammed tariffs on $200 billion in Chinese imports, prompting China to respond with the levies on $60 billion in American goods, with the world's two largest economies trading punches. The International Monetary Fund this week lowered its global growth forecast, citing the trade wars and its impact. The president has threatened to levy 25% trade tariffs on the remaining $257 billion of Chinese imports if Beijing refuses to eliminate trade and economic policies that Washington regards as discriminatory. And during earlier talks, of course, the Chinese diplomats have offered to buy larger amounts of American agriculture, industrial products to narrow the trade deficit with China, which, however, Trump vows to eliminate all of this, and President Trump has rejected those offers, holding out for more comprehensive changes. And joining us to talk a little bit more about this is Aina Tangent, political and economic commentator, who joins us from Beijing. Now, Aina Tangent, thanks very much for talking to us this evening. Now, it's hard to anticipate if there is going to be any breakthrough from this, from these talks at the G20, as several reports are suggesting. But what would be certainly good news for China is that at least the U.S. is now beginning to talk to them.
Absolutely. I mean, this is much better. I think the precipitous drop in the stock market has prompted action by Donald Trump and his administration. They're very, very concerned about the economic situation, especially with the elections around the corner. So they need something to change the dialogue and make it appear that they're trying to solve this particular problem, especially as the economic outlook starts to dim.
Right, and Aina Tangent, I was talking earlier, I was reporting that how Donald Trump is sort of held out on any sort of midterm negotiations, and he wants, more comprehensive changes from the Chinese because, and what we believe, the rest of the world, how it perceives is that China has more to lose from this trade war than America does.
Well, I think that's a mistake. I mean, there's no winners in a trade war between the two largest powers. And the fact is, it's like a ball of string. You pull on one end, and unfortunately what happens is it starts pulling on others. Remember that 30% of the value of goods that are going to the U.S. do not come from China. They're actually from other, mostly ASEAN countries, and Japan, South Korea, and things like this. So the U.S. has realized that it's a much more complex situation. I think Donald Trump was playing this for the politics. I think he still is. He wants to appear that he's in charge and that he knows what's going on. So it makes sense at this juncture, given the economic circumstances, that he's coming back and saying, look, let's talk.
Right, and that sort of U-turn we've seen with, Donald Trump on several policy issues, but we saw how the markets worldwide were reacting just yesterday, and they have been tumbling, as well, Aina Tangent. But, just to take a step back, just yesterday there was a Chinese embassy statement here in India which actually asked China and India to sort of deepen cooperation in a sense to fight the bullying tactics of the U.S. So there's been a lot of rhetoric. There's also been sort of, plan A, plan B, plan C for the Chinese as well as the Americans when they're talking policy issues with the United States.
Well, absolutely. I mean, remember, in the backdrop of this, you have the SCO meeting, which is taking place in Tajikistan. And at that point, I mean, Russia is pushing for both India and China and the rest of the SCO group, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, to back off on the sanctions, to ignore not the UN sanctions, but the unilateral sanctions of the U.S. If that were to actually happen, it would be very, very dangerous to the U.S. because it would signal a loss in confidence of American leadership in that. So I think there's a number of things playing it. It's the politics on the side internally and within the U.S., but also what's happening abroad.
Right, Einar Tangent, political commentator, joining us from Beijing. Thanks very much indeed for your thoughts this evening on that possible discussion between the US and China on the sidelines of the G20.